Hello everybody and welcome to my first ever Power Rankings on OCG Pro Wrestling. Every month I want to do a Power Rankings on who I believe are the top 20 wrestlers of the month. And even plan on going back to my 1982 videos once I'm done with the winter of 1982. Just a few more videos to go before I can move on to the spring. But I want to do some power rankings for back in the day too. But not only am I going to do my power rankings for the best wrestlers, but in the next couple of days, I also want to start power rankings for promotions / brands. But today we start with what I believe are the top 20 wrestlers of January 2023. Now, a lot of people who do rankings for wrestlers, even the magazines that do the top 100 or the PWI 500 wrestlers, when they do it, they put way too much emphasis on in-ring work, I guess, the in-ring performance. And the more wrestling goes along these days, the more subjective that in-ring performance gets, because some of us longtime fans who have been watching from the 80s or 90s, or some even from the 70s, who still enjoy professional wrestling, and hell, I would even add the 2000s into this. Today's product of in-ring performances are a lot different, and some of us think it's for the worst. So what is qualified as good in-ring capabilities to fans who have only been a fan of wrestling for the past 10 to 15 years might be a lot different than us that have been watching a lot longer. You do need to qualify their in-ring capabilities, but I also think psychology in their in-ring capabilities needs to be talked about as well. But to get a well-rounded performer in professional wrestling, you also need to look at their promo capabilities, which is lacking a lot these days, and as well as their overall character. Are they actually in character when they're wrestling? Do they have a deep enough character in the first place when they're giving a promo? And also important to what makes a good wrestler, in my opinion, to be a well-rounded great wrestler, I do think you need to look at their current feud or story and see if it's actually hot or working at all. And so taking those four things in mind, there might be a few wrestlers outside of my top 20 that some people think deserve to be in there. And I'm sure there's at least one or two in my top 20 that people are going to be like, what? Why is that guy in there? He shouldn't be there. Or she's too high. I could see those things happening, but whatever. These are my top 20 power rankings. Some of the people that are outside of it, there's not a lot of representation from New Japan or Japan in general. There's a couple in my top 20. People like Jay White are out of my top 20, even though I do think Jay White is pretty great. He has not done a lot in January in New Japan. He wrestled at Wrestle Kingdom, lost his title, and hasn't really been in anything since. So he is not in my top 20 for January. I've talked about Will Ospreay before on this channel, and I'm just not a big fan of his style. I do think January was the best month I've ever seen Will Ospreay. He actually cut the promo of his career leading up to Wrestle Kingdom, and he gave my favorite match I've ever watched him in. And he had a good story. I still need more of a character out of Will Ospreay that I just don't see one. He's the typical modern professional wrestler who just wants to be the best wrestler. That's not a character. It's not a persona. And when more than half of the wrestlers in the business have that same character, you don't stand out enough to me. So Will Ospreay is not in my top 20 either. Ken O from Noah, I like what I see from him in ring. Don't get enough outside of that though for me to put him in there. Where Impact is concerned, there will be some representation in my top 20 from Impact. I think most notably not in my top 20 power rankings for January is probably Mike Bailey, who I would have a little bit outside of the top 20. He's definitely coming into being a great hand in Impact. Clearly great in the ring. We finally got a good feud out of him where he finally showed more aggression, but it's still just not enough for me to put him in my top 20. AEW should probably have more representation in my top 20 than there is, but a huge problem I have with AEW, and I talk about it in my AEW videos a lot, is the booking. I love Jade Cargill. I think she's a star. I think she has a good character. Her promo is okay. It could be a little better at times. Her in-ring could be a little better at times. For a while, she was one of the best booked people in AEW because she's just getting win after win after win. But they dropped the whole Bow Wow story that they put her in, and they are half-assing her story with the baddies falling apart. So Jade Cargill is outside of my 20, even though I do like her. And some other big notable names not in my top 20. Bryan Danielson is not in my top 20. I need to have a rant about Danielson coming up in one of my AEW videos, maybe as soon as this week, but I have not enjoyed his booking overall in AEW, and I feel like he's just having the same match over and over lately. So it's just not enough for me to put him in my top 20, even though if you've seen any of my videos on my other channel when I used to talk about wrestling, I would put Danielson over as one of the best in all of wrestling. And yet, after being in AEW for so long and going a whole lot of nowhere, he's not in my top 20 for January. Jericho's not in my top 20, although I would have him just outside of it. He's obviously one of the most well-rounded people in all of wrestling. Still, even at his old age, I wanted to put him in my top 20, but I just couldn't. I don't feel like his feud or story right now is all that great. He's basically on a losing streak anyway, at least at singles competition. And then Starks is also outside of my top 20, even though I think he is also very close. Someone who I also have right outside of my top 20, who I think is great, is Swerve Strickland. He cuts a good promo. He is starting to develop a good character. He's great in the ring, and why he's so great is he can do the flipping and the flying stuff that I give a lot of flack for. But Swerve also has psychology in wrestling matches when he needs to break it out. He understands that. But my biggest problem with Swerve, the booking and his storyline, where he is like heading up this new faction with two white guys that look like white supremacists when he's supposed to be a rapper. I'm not seeing how those things mesh together at all. He also hasn't gotten a lot of TV time in January when I think he deserves more. Lastly, before I actually finally get to my top 20, another big name from the WWE who I would put at number 21 probably, although Swerve would be close, in my opinion, and Jericho, and Starks, and even Danielson, but also very close. Seth Rollins is not in my top 20, and that comes a lot down to character for me. I've talked about this in my WWE videos a lot, that Rollins' character is all over the place. There's no rhyme or reason to it, and this has happened a lot in Rollins' career, in my opinion, where he's had a ton of different monikers, but then his character never really progresses anything more than one note. And I still feel like Seth Rollins' character, who still comes across like a heel in his promos, is supposed to be a face now. They could do better with Rollins and fleshing that character out. But let's finally get to my top 20 power rankings for January 2023. We start at number 20 with the Impact Knockouts champion, Mickie James, comes in at number 20. She wins back the Knockout title after having a great story where she put her career on the line, possibly her final rodeo against Jordynne Grace, but she wins the match, wins the title, And for me, I think Mickie James is honestly one of the top women's wrestlers of all time. She can still go in the ring. Her promos are okay. I think of all the 4 things I listed of the criteria for this top 20, her promos are her weakest. These days, that wasn't always the case. There was a time in WWE where she was a great promo because she had that crazy character going on. She was good at that. But still good enough to be on my top 20, although barely making the power rankings for January. Number 19 is somebody coming out of having a great Royal Rumble in the WWE, and he's been having a pretty good title run. I'm talking about Gunther, who lasted the entire Royal Rumble. And I like something Triple H said about Gunther in the press conference after the Royal Rumble, that you never really lost him in the Rumble. He was always in the forefront during the Rumble, and so he continues to grow to me in my power rankings. This month would probably be the first time I would have him in my top 20. His character is pretty straightforward. He doesn't like all these shenanigans in wrestling. He wants it to be so pure. They can do more with that, but I think so far, so good with Gunther, who continues to be built up very well under Triple H. And number 18 is one of the people I was saying people are going to question, why is this person in the top 20? And number 18 is Bully Ray from Impact Wrestling, who continues to be one of the best heels in all of pro wrestling. I don't care what anybody says, he doesn't have to rely on cheap heat attacking the audience constantly. All he does is stay in character and be a bully to other wrestlers, and that's what gets him all the heat. He's become a master of that as this character over the years. Now he's been doing this Bully Ray character for several years now, and he's still good. His feud with Josh Alexander, and what all built to it, it wasn't just about Josh Alexander. He was basically bullying Alexander and other officials in Impact to try and get his way at a shot at Alexander. And it was good. It was good wrestling television. And that brings me to number 17, the Impact World Champion, Josh Alexander. Number 17 in my power rankings because Alexander can go in that ring. He is a great technical wrestler. It can lack psychology from time to time, but other times he brings psychology to his matches too. He's coming out of this good feud with Bully Ray. His weakness would maybe be his promos, but sometimes I think they're pretty great too. His character, we finally got some aggression out of him because of the Bully Ray feud. But I think what I loved about the Bully Ray feud and Josh Alexander's part in it, it fleshed out Josh Alexander as a person to us, getting his wife involved in the story, getting us to care about him and his wife more when Bully Ray is threatening to injure her. That's how you get a character over, and they did that well with Alexander. That's why he is at 17th in my power rankings. Number 16, Rhea Ripley, who continues to grow more and more as a character as well. I think hooking her up with Dominic story-wise has been great. And that's somebody else I forgot to mention who could easily be in my top 20 and would probably surprise people. Dominic Mysterio, since he's been put in Judgment Day, his personality as a heel and just being able to play along in promos and in segments is pretty great. I think he is coming across really good as a personality. He's been way more loose as a bad guy. And I think a lot of that has to do with Rhea Ripley. She's basically the head of the Judgment Day. Some people compare her to Chyna. I don't really see that. I mean, they kind of play her up with some men. I don't really like that in professional wrestling. I think Chyna was the one person that actually worked for because kayfabe was still alive and well, kinda, at that time. But it was alive and well with Chyna. It's not alive and well with Rhea Ripley. What my big negative for Ripley is that during her Royal Rumble, like I talked about with Gunther, is that you never lost Gunther during the Rumble. Ripley disappeared through that entire Rumble, except for a few big moments that she had. And also, they're making her feud with Charlotte Flair again instead of Bianca Belair. I guess they want to save that for the future. But we've seen the Charlotte Flair feud with Rhea before. So a lot of it, the booking with the women in all of wrestling right now is not very good. I need to do a rant about Triple H and his booking for the women one of these days. And I will do that. But Ripley is a great character right now. I think her promos are pretty good too. Her in-ring is okay. And her story might be lacking in the Charlotte Flair feud. But for now, she's a 16th place and likely to be a women's champion by WrestleMania, you would think. At number 15 is Jimmy Uso. I have separated the Usos. Sometime in my power rankings, I'm going to put tag teams as a unit together in one spot. But I had to split up the Usos. I think Jimmy Uso, he's not the least intriguing person of the bloodline. I think that is Solo Sikoa, who is a very one-note character, but it still works in this great bloodline story that he's kind of just the enforcer for Roman Reigns. But Jimmy Uso is getting more of a development now where he feels like his brother Jey is choosing a friend Sami Zayn over himself, his brother. So we could see more layers to the Jimmy Uso character, but when it comes right down to it, Uso is a part of the bloodline story, and that is the main reason he is this high in the rankings, honestly. Number 14 is Kiyomiya, the heavyweight champion out of Pro Wrestling Noah, who people are calling a young Okada, and I'm starting to see that more and more. I would go so far as to say that Kiyomiya might have more of a presence on the microphone. Now, I don't understand Japanese, but so I can't fully break down these promos. But once the announcers broke down at the Wrestle Kingdom Part 2 between Noah and New Japan what Kiyomiya was saying and challenging Okada, I thought it came across very believable. I talked about that angle that they did at that show where Kiyomiya kicks him in the face because Okada keeps dismissing him and not want to give him the time of day. And so we're getting that character development out of Kiyomiya where he wants to prove himself as this up-and-comer to the big dog in all of Japan is good shit. It's good shit. At number 13 is the AEW Women's Champion, Jamie Hayter, who I would love to have higher, but much like the booking in the WWE, Tony Khan's booking for women is just as bad, if not worse, because Hayter doesn't get a lot of mic time, even though I think she's pretty good at it. But she doesn't get a lot of mic time, and she doesn't get a lot of face time in general as the women's world champion in AEW. She's also not really in a story or feud that seems long term. Like, they're doing a story that I like in AEW where it's like the originals versus the incoming people from WWE. I like that. But Hayter's just not getting enough time or respect from Tony Khan as the women's champion. She could be higher in my power rankings, but blame Tony Khan not giving her enough time. Brock Lesnar comes in at number 12. Maybe a little high. I can concede for Lesnar because he's such a part-timer. But also, anytime he has a presence, he makes the best of it. He gets his huge pops from the audience. He continues to be in this feud with Bobby Lashley that I wish would pick up a little more and actually go somewhere. Which is why I don't have Lesnar nor Lashley in my top 10. But Brock Lesnar is still one of the best in the business, one of the biggest stars in the business at number 12. I have Lashley at number 11 because I wish they would pull the trigger and do something more with him again. Like, they always push Lashley to a certain point and then they kind of just cap him off there. I don't know. They keep teasing the Hurt Business getting back together. He's in a kind of a feud with Austin Theory, the U.S. champion, but also in a feud with Lesnar. So the character to me is kind of all over the place, and so is his feuds, and so are his promos. But it's still good enough for me to put him high in my rankings, and his in-ring capability is honestly, I think, one of the best in the WWE right now is Bobby Lashley when it comes to matches. He is delivering constantly in matches lately, and I don't know if he's getting enough credit for it. All right, we're getting into our top 10. Number 10 is the American Nightmare, Cody Rhodes. Cody comes in at number 10, pretty high for just returning, but he wins the Men's Royal Rumble. He's getting a shot at Roman Reigns at WrestleMania. I'm going to be getting into this on my next WWE video of should Cody be the one challenging Roman for the titles at WrestleMania, or should it be Sami Zayn because of the story. But Cody is very much over. He had a pretty great promo on Raw. He's good at telling his story. His story being he wants to do what his father never did and win WWE's main title. His promos are, I think, great. His in-ring is great. His character is okay. I think we still need to see more development, especially if he's going to be shoehorned into what is an epic at this point bloodline story. Then I think that Cody needs... we still need a little more from Cody, I think, than what we're getting. It needs to be layered, just like the big story. Bianca Belair, some will say she's too high still. I will disagree. A lot of that on social media is racism. But I think that Belair is the EST of women's wrestling right now. Still, now, a few months ago, I would have put Belair in my top 5. But unfortunately, since Survivor Series, the feud with Alexa Bliss just wasn't that great. It was okay. It got a little better before they finally fought at Royal Rumble. But for whatever reason, well, I know the reason, Triple H's booking for the women is not good. The booking for Belair over the past 2 months has been kind of half-assed. But her character's there. Her promos can get a little stale. In the ring, though, I don't think any woman outperforms Belair. I'm just being honest with you. You can look no further than the last woman standing match between her and Bayley, which other organizations tried to copy and have their own last woman standing match, and they weren't even half as good as Belair versus Bayley. She delivers in big matches like that. When she delivered at WrestleMania. So Belair delivers in the ring. She delivers as a character, but we need more development as her as champion as a feud. And right now, she's not looking like she's in the main women's feud at WrestleMania. So I don't like it for her. I think she deserves better booking, but what are you going to do? Triple H sucks at booking women for some reason. Number 8, the Acclaimed, the AEW Tag Team Champions, come in at number 8. Look, great characters. The rap is always funny. Especially the ones about Jeff Jarrett, they were great. The feud with the Gun Club, I think, could be a little more. AEW struggles at elevating their feuds. But I think the Acclaimed are the best tag team going right now. FTR is taking a break. That's why they're not in my top 20. They didn't do anything in January except lose at Wrestle Kingdom. And sadly, rip Jay Briscoe, so I can't have the Briscoe brothers in my top 20, my first ever top 20. So the Acclaimed, well, I forget about the Usos. It's the Acclaimed versus the Usos as the top tag team, obviously, but I'm splitting the Usos up in my rankings for a reason. But the Acclaimed comes in at number 8 because I think they are genuinely the most over thing in AEW. When I went to the live event, the live Dynamite in Los Angeles, everyone I was sitting around was talking about, are the Acclaimed going to be here? Because they didn't appear on Dynamite. They didn't appear until they recorded Rampage. And after Dynamite, everyone was tired. But once the Acclaimed came out on Rampage, everyone was fired up again. So I genuinely think the Acclaimed is the most over act in AEW. At number 7, Kevin Owens, who has helped make the Bloodline story develop even more than it has in January, kind of being the guy that gets his ass kicked. Being this big fighter, he had a lot of heart against Roman Reigns, but it became too much. I think we're going to get even more character development out of him when it comes to him and Sami Zayn, which should be great. He did have that big botch in the match against Roman Reigns, which is why I dropped him a little in my power rankings. But Kevin Owens is always entertaining and has always been one of my favorites over the past decade or more. Number 6, Kenny Omega. Coming off of things both in AEW and New Japan, Kenny Omega was in those trios matches and was probably one of the best things about them, which they're spot fests. But I think Omega brought a big match feel to some of them, which was needed. He then goes into New Japan, has a great segment / promo with Will Ospreay, goes out and defeats Will Ospreay to continue their story and feud, where he's just saying Ospreay just isn't ready yet. He's still better than Ospreay. He goes and proves it. But I don't know if Omega is in a big enough story or feud or having enough character development for me to put him in the top 5. At number 5, some are going to say I might be too low. I will argue and disagree. That is MJF at number 5, the AEW World Heavyweight Champion. He's my highest wrestler for AEW in these rankings. A lot of this, once again, to me, goes back to Tony Khan's booking. The booking before, and I've talked about this countless times on this channel now, but I'm going to talk about it again. The booking for MJF before he won the title from Moxley, where they were teasing him as a face, and he turns on the firm for no reason, and then William Regal helps him win the title, and then he beats up William Regal a week or two later. It was a lot of all over the place booking. And the part where they're teasing him as a face, it has made people want to cheer MJF. And so now every time you see an MJF promo, it goes either one of two ways, and usually both. He has to scrape the bottom of the barrel for cheap heat, which he never had to do because he was just a natural heel who was getting heat, or he has to ramble on too long to get his point across to seem like he's telling the best promo of all time, which he hasn't been doing. He hasn't been doing. I've said this before and I'll say it again, and I believe a commenter said it as well. He's trying too hard. MJF is having to try too hard to be the heel he once was because of the poor booking before he won the title. So I can't have him any higher than this. I still think MJF is one of the best going on the mic. His promos are arguably one of the best in wrestling outside of, we all know who, Roman Reigns. But I still think MJF is certainly one of the top people in all of wrestling, but only at number 5 for me in January. And number 4 in my power rankings for January is the New Japan IWGP World Champion. Okada comes in at number 4. Okada is just one of the best in the ring, constantly. Not much more I can say about that. But I think we're seeing character development with Okada for the first time in a long time, where Jay White is calling him a coward, but then he goes and beats Jay White for the title. But then, when Kiyomiya from Noah attacks him, and he's been trying to put off Kiyomiya, saying he's not worthy of his time, now Okada's saying he doesn't want to wrestle Kiyomiya, and he's kind of proving Jay White right. Is he afraid of Kiyomiya? Is he being a coward? Now the match is made and booked, but I think this is the first time we've seen a real spark lit under Okada's ass for the first time in a while. I said it on my last New Japan video. We can't see Okada always being heated because it wouldn't fit the character. And so when he does get pissed off and somebody does push him to that point, it does mean more, and it's more special that way. So I like that Okada is finally again in a really hot feud because it really brings out the best out of him. And that's why I have him at number 4. Number 3 is Main event, Jey Uso. Now, my top 3 all are because of this great storytelling with the bloodline. I will talk about this more on my next WWE video at the end of the week. But without Jey Uso, there's no great bloodline story in the first place, because in 2020, when this story was first starting, and he was the one kind of going against Roman Reigns as the head of the table, Reigns had to beat him down literally and gaslight him into being a part of the bloodline. And now with Sami Zayn having enough of Roman Reigns and turning his back on him, Jey Uso sees that Sami Zayn can do it. Why can't he? So he walks out on the bloodline, finally seeing somebody else stand up to Roman Reigns within the bloodline. I think Jey Uso is a big part of the puzzle, and I think he's the most interesting thing going with the bloodline to see what he does. So the Jey Uso character is very intriguing, very well developed. It's coming full circle. And of course, the Usos are just a great tag team, so I have him at number 3 in my power rankings. Number 2 has to be Sami Zayn, who I think will continue to be the most over babyface in the WWE. And that's why there is a debate about Sami Zayn and Cody Rhodes and who should really get a shot at Roman's title. Sami Zayn got one of the biggest pops in the WWE in a long time, hitting Roman Reigns with that chair. And so once again, just like for Jey, it's very interesting to see where they go with Sami Zayn. Will we get a big enough payoff with Sami Zayn? I'll talk about that more on my WWE video this week. But if Zayn has to be at number 2, he is the most over babyface in wrestling right now. And number 1 is Roman Reigns, the big dog, the head of the table. Roman is hitting it out of the park as this character. It keeps being built bigger and bigger and bigger to hopefully have a huge payoff with somebody. I think Roman's promos are some of the best in wrestling because of the way he does want people to acknowledge him, not just by saying "acknowledge me," but the way he speaks and how loose he is in that ring, being able to say whatever he needs to say in a promo, in a segment. I think Roman is going to go down as one of the best heels of all time when it's all said and done. Now, of course, this whole story, there's recency bias to it. So we're all saying it's the best story of the last 20 years, and it probably is. But right now, they're doing all the right things with Roman, making him so important, and he does it himself. He makes himself so important because of the way he's been carrying himself as this character for 2 years now, over 2 years now. I just really hope that the Bloodline story will finally make wrestlers want to tell stories again. No more of this video game indie shit where they kick out of every move and then lose to a roll-up pin. That doesn't get anything over. All of these crazy moves they do on the indies so they can get 20,000 views on Twitter, it's ridiculous. This Bloodline segment at the end of the Royal Rumble got over 20 million views on social media in less than a day. Less than a day because of storytelling. And that's why my top 3 all has to do with the Bloodline. Roman Reigns, Sami Zayn, Jey Uso. The storytelling, the layers, the character work. What more can I say? Good shit.